Yesterday, both Vice President J.D. Vance and Todd Blanche, former Trump criminal defense attorney, who now serves as acting attorney general, who's going to oversee this fund, worked hard to make the deal seem reasonable, and they failed abjectly. Today, you've got Republicans coming out against it on Capitol Hill.
It doesn't look right. You can't do it that way when you're negotiating with yourself and for yourself.
What do you make of this $1.7 billion fund for
bad news? We're going to try to kill it.
You're going to try and kill it?
Yep.
Wow.
It is as if somebody sued themselves and agreed upon a settlement with themselves that's going to be funded by the rest of us. Now, if that's the case, what? Wait a second. I just came off the campaign trail. People are concerned about making their own ends meet, not about putting a slush fund together without a legal precedent.
That's a Republican calling Trump's settlement a slush fund, and another one threatening to kill it. Even the top Republican in the Senate, the one who sets the body's agenda, is sounding skeptical.
What are your thoughts about this weaponization fund from the president at this point?
Yeah, not a big fan. And I'm not sure exactly how they intend to use it, but my understanding is that was just announced. And, but yeah, I don't see a purpose for that. I don't see a purpose for that.
So just, in 24 hours, you have a significant number of Republicans in key positions that are turning against this brazenly corrupt act out of a brazenly corrupt administration. And it's just one development of many today showing the very quickly building backlash to this madness. I mean, you heard it from Senator Cassidy, again, who's a bit untethered now, right? He lost his primary. He's not going to be in the Senate. In fact, 2 police officers who were assaulted on January 6th filed suit today to stop it. We're going to talk to one of those officers in just a few minutes. But I think, again, when this first came out, it was so strange that it was kind of shocking, but also I think a lot of people were like, wait, what? Could this? So today it's really sinking in for people what this is. Not only is Donald Trump stealing $1.8 billion of your money, of all of our money, that could go to any number of things to make people's lives better, just straight up withdrawing it from the Treasury. There will be a transfer from the Treasury, draining the bank account that our money sits in. He is very likely to give it out to the people who violently stormed the Capitol on his behalf in an attempt to steal an election, in a biggest, gravest threat to the constitutional order since the Civil War. The people, you remember, who beat police officers, people who sought to harm elected officials, people who were convicted of seditious conspiracy against the United States, one of the rarest and most serious crimes in the entire federal code, plotting to use violence to overthrow the government. As the New York Times reports, many convicted and pardoned rioters are, as you might imagine, elated at the possibility they're going to get some of that sweet moolah, that a payout is going to be coming their way. In some cases, as we've been tracking, many of those rioters that Trump pardoned have gone on to commit other crimes, assaulted police officers, beating them to within an inch of their life. It would include the people convicted of seditious conspiracy. That's what Trump's saying. And keep in mind here, the Department of Justice already paid off Trump's disgraced former National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, more than $1 million of your dollars after the DOJ prosecuted him for lying to law enforcement. A crime, by the way, he pled guilty to. He was pardoned by Trump. That $1 million was peanuts next to the millions they paid to the family of Ashley Babbitt, the Capitol rioter, who was shot and killed by law enforcement after trying to storm the Speaker's lobby, the first one through the door, while elected officials were still evacuating there with an enormous braying mob behind her. And now Trump has a $1.8 billion pool of money transferred from you to him by his own government. And so millions of dollars of taxpayer money will be flowing, it appears, as reparations. The country got reparations. Would you look at that? But January 6th reparations to a group that includes child sex offenders. How do you feel about the money going to those people? Your money going to those people. How do you feel about that? Senator Chris Van Hollen explicitly asked Todd Blanche to rule that specific scenario out yesterday, and he did not.
There's also an individual who, after being pardoned by the president, went on to molest 2 children. Can you commit to making the rules so that that person is not eligible for a payout under this fund?
Well, you're obviously lying in your question, because there's no way that this person committed to that
the slush fund, as you call it, which is not, didn't exist.
No, he wasn't lying. Blanche said the senator was lying because he wasn't lying. It's true, the slush fund hadn't existed yet. But this guy, the one who's doing life for multiple rapes of children, that guy thought the money was coming because Donald Trump telegraphed it was. And guess what? He guessed correctly because the slush fund does exist now. So here's Senator Patty Murray simply stating the facts of that case.
I just have to tell you, this is corruption that has never been more blatant or more widespread. What is happening is you write the check, Trump and his cronies cash it, American taxpayers who are already being whacked with high prices are going to foot the bill. That's what we are seeing today, and that is what many of us are really, really angry about.
So what can be done to stop it? Well, a Democratic effort to subpoena Blanche and the other officials behind Trump's settlement failed this evening. That's because Republicans voted against it. But even Republicans are grumbling a little bit about the president's abuse of power. And so there's a chance that, as with the release of the Epstein files, Congress can file a discharge petition to block the slush fund. It is a legislative move that's incredibly rare, but before Donald Trump, so is impeachment.
The immunity decision by the Supreme Court gave Donald Trump immunity for any interactions that he has with his attorney general, right? Were there caveats to that?
Any interactions with his attorney general, what it said was, I think it's a little bit more narrow than that. It was talking in the context of getting advice from people at the Department of Justice vis-a-vis the 2020 election. It said that conversations that he had with people in the Department of Justice at that time could be considered official acts and therefore were covered by immunity for his official acts. But of course, in the wake of that decision, we never had further litigation that sorted out what was official and what was unofficial. And certainly Jack Smith and his lawyers were saying that a bulk of actions that the president took that were under indictment were in fact unofficial acts. One could say the same about this, that ultra vires or patently unlawful acts, acts that violate an existing federal law, are themselves could never be official. And Katie, I want to point out to you and the viewers, there's a federal statute that prohibits certain people in the federal government from influencing an audit, either the conduct of an audit or stopping an audit. One of the people that is specifically enumerated in that statute is the President of the United States. If Congress viewed the president as immune from prosecution, it would have never named the president in that statute as someone who couldn't commit that act, because what is the way in which that statute's enforced? It's enforced by a criminal prosecution by that very same Department of Justice.
But Barbara, this is all so tangled and hard to follow. And when you talk about the Supreme Court and the way they've ruled against the president, I guess I bring it up for the reason that they just have, there's been a knee-jerk reaction to allow a president or an executive to do whatever they want almost while they're in office. And when you're starting to define or trying to define what is an official act and what is not an official act, I wonder, is this the sort of thing that would be clear-cut? Am I wrong to even bring this into the conversation?
The narrative took a dramatic turn when the Supreme Court signaled a shift that no one in Trump's circle was expecting. What had been framed by allies as a strategic legal pathway suddenly hit a wall, and not a small one. Behind closed doors, discussions that once seemed routine began to carry a different tone. More urgency, more uncertainty, and a growing realization that the legal framework they were relying on was far less secure than they had claimed publicly. At the center of it all was a controversial plan that critics argued could undermine the integrity of the electoral process. Supporters insisted it was a legitimate challenge, grounded in constitutional arguments and concerns about irregularities. But as the legal battle escalated, it became clear that the highest court in the country was not prepared to move in the direction Trump's team had hoped. The decision to block the effort didn't come out of nowhere. For weeks, legal experts had been dissecting the arguments, pointing out weaknesses and warning that the court, especially with its current composition, might not be willing to intervene in such a sweeping way. Even some conservative scholars expressed skepticism, noting that the judiciary traditionally avoids stepping into disputes that could be seen as overtly political unless there is a clear and compelling constitutional violation. Inside Trump's camp, the reaction was immediate and intense. Advisors who had been confident just days earlier were now scrambling to reassess their options. Meetings stretched late into the night as lawyers debated next steps, weighing whether to pivot to alternative strategies or double down on public messaging. The mood, according to insiders, shifted from optimism to frustration almost overnight. Meanwhile, the broader political landscape was reacting just as quickly. Opponents of the plan seized on the court's move as validation of their warnings, arguing that the attempt had always been about overturning a legitimate outcome rather than addressing genuine concerns. They pointed to the ruling as evidence that the system, despite pressure, was holding firm. Supporters, however, saw it differently. Many argued that the court's decision represented a missed opportunity to address issues they believed were real and significant. Some went further, suggesting that the judiciary itself was becoming part of a larger problem, though those claims were met with pushback from legal analysts who emphasized the importance of evidence and established legal standards. As the story unfolded, media coverage intensified, with networks and commentators offering sharply divided interpretations. Some framed the moment as a decisive blow to Trump's efforts, while others portrayed it as just one chapter in an ongoing fight. Social media amplified every angle, turning legal arguments into viral talking points and fueling a cycle of outrage and speculation. Behind the scenes, the implications were being carefully considered. The court stance not only affected the immediate plan but also set a tone for how similar challenges might be treated in the future. Legal scholars noted that such decisions could influence strategies for years to come, shaping how campaigns approach disputes and how courts respond to them. For Trump himself, the moment carried both political and personal weight. Publicly, he continued to project confidence, insisting that the fight was far from over. Privately, according to those familiar with the situation, there was growing recognition that the path forward would be more complicated than anticipated. The situation also raised broader questions about the role of the judiciary in highly charged political conflicts. How far should courts go in resolving disputes that have massive electoral consequences? Where is the line between legal oversight and political intervention? These questions, long debated, were now front and center once again. As days passed, attention turned to what might come next. Would there be new filings, new arguments, new attempts to reshape the narrative? Or would the focus shift toward influencing public opinion and preparing for future battles? The uncertainty kept both supporters and critics on edge, watching closely for any sign of the next move. What was clear, however, was that the Supreme Court's decision had changed the dynamics in a significant way. It disrupted a strategy that had been carefully constructed and forced a recalibration at the highest levels of Trump's operation. Whether that recalibration would lead to a new approach or mark the beginning of the end for this particular effort remained to be seen. In the end, the moment underscored the unpredictable nature of high-stakes legal and political battles. Plans that appear solid can unravel quickly when confronted with judicial scrutiny. And in a system built on checks and balances, even the most determined efforts can be halted when they collide with the limits of the law. The story is far from over, but one thing is certain: the court's move has reshaped the conversation, setting the stage for whatever comes next in a saga that continues to capture national attention. In the hours after, allies on television and online platforms quickly mobilized, attempting to reframe the narrative. Instead of presenting the decision as a loss, they described it as part of a larger struggle against entrenched institutions. Messaging became sharper, more emotional, and aimed directly at energizing the base. The goal was clear: shift the focus away from the courtroom setback and toward a broader argument about fairness and power. At the same time, legal experts across the country continued to analyze the court's reasoning. Many pointed out that the decision wasn't just about one case. It reflected a consistent reluctance by courts to intervene in election outcomes without overwhelming evidence. This pattern, they noted, had been visible in multiple rulings leading up to this moment, suggesting that the outcome, while dramatic, was not entirely surprising from a legal standpoint. Within Trump's inner circle, tensions reportedly grew. Different factions blamed each other for misreading the situation. Some argued that the legal team had overpromised and underdelivered, creating unrealistic expectations. Others believed the strategy itself had been sound, but that external factors, including timing and public pressure, had influenced the result. These internal disagreements added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Meanwhile, state officials and election administrators found themselves back in the spotlight. Many of them had previously defended the integrity of the electoral process, and the court's move was seen by some as reinforcing their position. For these officials, the ruling offered a moment of validation, but it also came with renewed scrutiny and, in some cases, increased security concerns due to heightened tensions.